Good evening, all of you. Today we are going to discuss about the methods of studying psychology of learning. Here we will discuss about the introspection method, observation method, and experimental method. So first of all, we will discuss about the objective, then introduction, then about introspection method, then observation method, then experimental method. So in the objective, after reading this unit, you will be able to describe the introspection method, state the merits and demerits on introspection method, and describe the observation method, state the merits and demerits of observation method, explain the states and demerits of observation method, then explain the states of experimental method. Then you will be able to state the merits and demerits of experimental method. Then you will be able to describe the clinical method and state the merit and demerit of clinical method. So in introduction, dear student, in this preceding section you have analyzed the nature, definition, and scope and functioning of psychology of learning. We have also discussed the psychological concept of learning. In this unit we will describe the importance of methods of studying psychology of learning. Student, all the methods of study psychology of learning are basically methods of general psychology. So, a brief review of the development of method will be helpful for you to understand the important of the subject in greater perspective. The first effort of conducting systematic experimental studies in psychology was started in 1879 in Germany with the establishment of the first laboratory of psychology by William Verdant. The next important method of collecting data was involved with the development of psychoanalysis and independent system of psychology by Sigmund Freud, who emphasized the importance of unconscious in understanding the behavior. In the second decade of 20th century, psychology developed as an objective science of behavior by the effort of Paula Watson and Catherine. Um, Experimental and observation methods were developed to collect data to study behavior. Simultaneously, testing movement is started with the introduction of statistics in psychology. Students, here we will study only the important following methods of studying psychology of learning. They are introspection method, observation method, and experimental method. Introspection method, student, at many times when you have experienced an emotion like anger or fear, you begin to think reasons for the state of yours. You say, why have I been annoyed over this or that? Why been afraid of such things? The analysis of your emotional state may take place simultaneously with the emotion, or it may be done after the emotional state is over. In whatever manner it is done, it gives you an understanding, though rudimentary, of your mind. This method of probing into your mental processes is a method of introduction utilized by psychologists in a much refined manner. Let us see in detail what do we mean by introduction and its merits and demerits. What we mean by introspection. Introduction is a method of self-observation. The word introspection is made up of two Latin words. Intro means within, and inspection means looking. Hence, it is a method where an individual is looking within oneself. So, Angel considered it as looking for inward. In introspection, the individual peeps into his own mental state and observes his own mental processes. Stout considers that to introspect is an attempt to working of one's own mind in a systematic manner. Introspection method is one of the oldest method to collect data from data about the conscious experiences of the subject. It is a process of self-examination where one perceives, analyzes, and reports one's own feelings. Let us learn this process with the help of an example. Suppose you are happy, and in a state of happiness, you look within yourself. It is said you are introspecting your own mental feelings and examining what is going on in your mental process in the state of happiness. Similarly, you may introspect in a state of anger or fear, etc. Introspection is also defined as the notice which the mind takes of itself. Let us see the stages distinguished in introspection. Students, there are three clear stages in introspection. During the observation of external object, the person being to ponder over his own mental states. For example, while listening to the music which is to him pleasant or unpleasant, he started thinking about his own mental states. The person begins to question the working of his own mind. He thinks and analyzes why has he said such and such things, why has he talked in a particular manner, and so on. He tries to frame the laws and conditions of the mental process. He thinks in terms of improvement of his reasoning or the control of his emotional stages. The stage of that of the scientific methods for the advancement of our scientific knowledge. Characteristic of introspection being self-observation has the following characteristic. The subject gets direct, immediate, and intuitive knowledge about the mind. The subject has actually to observe his own mental processes. He cannot speculate about them. The student introduction method was widely used in the past. Its use in modern times is being questioned. It is considered unscientific and not in keeping with psychology, which has recently emerged out as a positive science. However, we may say that it is still being used by psychologists, and through its supremacy is determined. Yet it is not totally discarded. Merits of introspection method. It is the cheapest and most economical method. We do not need any apparatus or laboratory for its use. This method can be used anytime and anywhere. You can introspect while working, traveling, sitting on a bed, and so on. It is the easiest method and is readily available to the individual. The introspection data are first hand as the person himself examines his own activities. Introspection has generated research which gradually lead to the development of more objective methods. It is still used in all experimental investigation. It is the only method with the help of which an individual can know his emotions and feelings. William James has pointed out the importance of this method in these words: introspective observation is what we have to rely on first and foremost and always. The word introspection can hardly be defined. It means, of course, looking into our own mind and reporting what we there discover. Everyone agrees that we there discover states of unconsciousness. So far as I know, the existence of such states has never been doubled by my critic. However, skeptical in other respects we may have been. So limitations of introspection method: in introspection, one needs to observe or examine one's mental process carefully in the form of thoughts, feelings, and sensation. The state of one's mental processes is continuously changing. Therefore, when one concentrates on introspecting a particular phase of one's mental activity, that phase passes off. For example, when you get angry at something and afterwards sit down to introspect calmly, the state of anger is sure to have passed off. And so, what you try to observe is not what is happening at that time with yourself, but what had happened some time before. The data collected by introspection cannot be verified. An individual may not pass through the same mental state again. There is no independent way of checking the data. The data collected by introspection lacks validity and reliability. It is impossible to acquire validity and exactness in self-observation of one's own mental processes. The data collected by introspection is highly subjective. It has danger of being biased and influenced by preconceptions of the individual. The observer and the observed are the same. Hence, there is ample scope for an individual to lie deliberately and hide the facts of mislead. Introspection cannot be applied to children, animal, and abnormal people. It requires highly trained and skilled workers to introspect. Introspection is logically defective because one and the same person is the experiencer and observer. It is not possible for the same individual to act as an experiencer or as well as an observer. Their introspection is logically defective. So, in conclusion, the limitation of introspection can be overcome by practice and training, by remaining alert during introspection, and by comparing results obtained by experts. So, then second, we are going to discuss about the observation method. Students, we observe so many things in nature. We also observe the action and behavior of others and form our own notions about this person. We look at the other person, listen to their talks and to try and infer what they mean. We try to infer the characteristic, motivations, and feelings and intentions of others on the basis of this observation. So let us study about the observation method employed by psychologists in detail. With the development of psychology as an objective science of learning behavior, the method of introspection was replaced by careful observation of human and animal behavior to collect data by research workers. In introspection, we can observe the mental process of ourselves only, but in observation, we observe the mental processes of others. Hence, observation is the most commonly used for the study of human behavior. So, meaning of observation. Observation literally means looking outside oneself. Facts are collected by observer over behavior of the individual in order to locate underlying problem and to study developmental traits of different types. The overt behavior is the manifestation of code condition within the individual. The study of overt behavior gives indirectly the clues to the mental condition of the individual. Observation means perceiving the behavior as it is. In the words of Kurtz, observation deals with the overt behavior of person in appropriate situation. Observation has been defined as measurement without instrument. For example, students in classroom have been labeled as good, fair, or poor in achievement, and lazy or diligent in a study, etc. On the basis of observation, observation is the indirect approach to the study of mental processes of others through observing their external behavior. For example, if someone frowns, howls, grins his teeth, closes his fist, you would say that the person is angry by only observing this external sign of his behavior. Students in the process of observation, following 4 steps are generally required. First, observation of behavior. The first step involved in the method of observation is directly perceiving or observing the behavior of individual under study. For example, if you want to observe the social behavior of children, we can observe it when they assemble and play. Second, recording the behavior observed. The observation should be carefully and immediately noted and recorded. Minimum time should be allowed to pass between happening and recording. It will make the observation more objective. Third, analysis and interpretation of behavior. When the notes of the behavior observed are completed, they are analyzed and objectively and scientifically in order to interpret the behavior patterns. Then fourth, generalization. On the basis of analysis and interpretation of the data collected with the help of observation method, it is possible to make certain generalization. Social, developmental, and behavior of children have been described by child a psychologist on the basis of generalization based upon analysis and interpretation of the data gathered through the observation method. Then we are going to discuss about the types of observation. Student, you have just seen what is observation, how it is conduct. Do you know there are different ways in which observation can be done? So let us see the different types of observation. First, we are going through natural observation. In natural observation, we observe the specific behavioral characteristics of children in natural settings. Subject do not become conscious of the fact that their behavior is being observed by someone. Second, participant observation. Here, the observer becomes the part of the group which he wants to observe. It discloses the minute and hidden facts. Then third, non-participant observation. Here, the observer observes in such a position which is least disturbing to the subject under study. The specific behavior is observed in natural setting without subjects getting conscious that they are observed by someone. Non-participant observation permits the use of recording instrument. Then fourth, the structure observation. Here, the observer is relevance, set up a form and categorize in terms of which he wishes to analyze the problem. The observer always keep in view a frame of reference, time units, and limit of an action. Then fifth one, unstructured observation. This is also called as uncontrolled or free observation. It is mainly associated with participant observation, in which the observer assumes the role of a member of the group to be observed. Here, the individual is observed when he is in his class, playground, or when he is moving about with his friends, and class follows without knowing that he is being observed. Observation is very useful method to study child and his behavior. Students' observation method being commonly used method, psychology has followed merits. Then merits of observation method being a record of actual behavior of the child. It is more reliable and objective. It is an excellent source of information about what actually happens in classroom. It is a study of an individual in a natural situation and is therefore more useful than the restricted study in a test situation. The method can be used with children of all ages. Younger the child, the easiest it is to observe him. This method has been found very useful with shy children. It can be used in every situation, physical activities, workshop, and classroom situation as well. It is adaptable both to the individual and the group. Although observation is regarded as an efficient method for psychological studies, students yet suffer from the following drawbacks. There's limitations are: first, there is a great scope for personal prejudices and biases of the observer. The observer interest values can distort observation. Records may not be written with 100% accuracy, as the observer are recorded after the action are observed. There is some time lag. The observer may get only a small sample of study behavior. It is very difficult to observe everything that the student does or says. As far as possible, observation should be made from several events. It reveals the overt behavior only, behavior that is expressed and not that is within. It lacks replicability as each natural situation can occur only once. Students looking at the drawbacks, an observation method has psychologists have suggested various guidelines to be followed for making good observation. So let us find out which are this essential guidelines for making good observation. So essential guidelines for making good observation: observe one individual at a time. It is desirable to focus attention on just one individual at a time in order to collect comprehensive data. Have a specific criteria for making observations. The purpose of making observation should be clear to the observed before he or she begins to observe, so that the essential characteristic or the behavior of the person fulfilling the purpose can be noted. Observations should be made over a period of time to have a real estimate of the true behavior of a person. It should be observed as frequently as possible. A single observation will not be sufficient to tell us that this is the characteristic of the individual. The observation should be made in different and natural situation in natural setting to increase its validity. For example, a pupil's behavior in the classroom may not be typical of him. Therefore, he should be observed in variety of setting to know the behavior most typical of the person. Then observe the pupil in context of the total situation. The observed facts must be recorded instantly. That is just at the time of their occurrence. Otherwise, the observer may forget some of facts and the recording may not be accurate. It is better to have two or more observers. Observers should be made under favorable conditions. The observer should be in position to clearly observe what he or she is observing. There should not be any undue distraction or disturbance. One should also have an attitude free from any biases or prejudices against the individual being observed. Data from observations should be integrated with other data while arriving at the final conclusion about the individual. One should put together all that we know about the individual from the other sources. Then we can give an integrated and comprehensive picture of the individual. This precaution must be borne in mind in order to have a reliable observation. So we are going to discuss about the experimental methods. Students, till now we saw introspection method and observation method used in psychology of learning, but this method lacks scientific objectivity and validity. Experimental method is most scientific and objective method of studying behavior. It is the method which is responsible for assigning the status of science to psychology. So let us learn more about this experimental method. In 1879, William Wardent established the first psychological laboratory at Leipzig in Germany. Since then, experimental method in psychology has become popular. Experimental method consists of actions of action performed under pre-arranged or rigidly controlled condition. Here, the emphasis is on experimentation. Experimentation is where the investigator controls the educative factors to which a group of children are subjected during the period of inquiry and observe the resulting achievement. J.W. Best describes experimental research as the description and analysis of what will be or what will occur under carefully controlled condition. Basic concept and essentials of experimental method. Experiments are always conducted in laboratory, hence the laboratory is essential. Psychological experiments performed in this method essentially require two people, the experiment or group of experimenters who perform experimental, and the other is the subject or subjects on whom the experiment is performed. The key factor in this method is the controlling of conditions or variables. The term variable means that which can be varied or changed. By controlling the variables, we can eliminate the relevant conditions and isolate the relevant ones. We thus become able to observe the causal relationship between the phenomena, keeping all other conditions almost constant. Let us understand this by an example. If we try to study the effect of intelligence on academic by the experimental method, we will need to determine the causative relation between the two phenomena, variables, that is intelligence and academic achievement. One of these variable, the effect of which we want to study, will be called the independent variable, and the stand for and the cause, and the dependent variable is the effect of the cause on the other conditions like study habit, gender, sex, socio-economic conditions, parental education, home environment, health, past learning, memory, etc., which exercise a good impact upon one's achievement besides one's intelligence, are termed interviewing variables. In experimentation, all such interviewing variables are to be controlled, that is, they are to be made constant or equalized, and the effect of only one independent variable, that is intelligence. In present case, one or more dependent variables is studied. The interviewing variables made constant are hence called as control variables. Steps in the experimental method. Students, we have described above the basic concepts of experimental method. Here we will describe different steps which are to be followed in conducting a typical experiment. These steps are as follows. Raising a problem. In any experiment, the first step is to identify a problem. For example, it has been observed that the students cheat in the examination. To stop it, many recommend strict supervision, but it has also been seen that even when there is a strict supervision, there is cheating. Hence, there crops up the problem of cheating under the strict supervision or relaxed supervision. This problem may lead to experimentation. Formulation of a hypothesis. The next step is experimental method is the formulation of a hypothesis that strict supervision may lead to the less copying in the examination as compared to the relaxed supervision. This hypothesis is now to be tested by experiment, making a distinction between independent and dependent variables. In the example given above, the cheating behavior of the student will be dependent variable, while the nature of the supervision will be the independent variable. It is because by changing the supervision, the cheating behavior is expected change. In the present experiment, we manipulate the conditions of supervising in order to discover the ways in which they determine the dependent variable, that is the cheating behavior. We may observe the effect of supervision in the experimental situation and also the effect of relaxed supervision under similar condition and with the same group of students. Then controlling the situational variables. The experiment will not give valid results unless the situational variable are controlled. If the experiment is conducted with different sets of students who have been trained in a different manner of have a different value system, then the results will be different in comparison to those who have been subjected to experimental earlier. Similarly, the other conditions like the person who is supervising, the place of supervision, etc., have to be controlled. This means that all those conditions which might affect the dependent variables are to be controlled. Since in any experiment there are numerous conditions which are needed to be controlled, it is many a time difficult to do so. Hence, we take recourse to various types of experimental designs which we have described earlier. Analysis of the results. Once the experiment is concluded, the results are analyzed. In our example, we may apply simple percentage to find out in which type of supervision a higher percentage of students have copied. Many a times we apply more sophisticated statistics to analyze the results. Verification of hypothesis. The last step in the experimental method is the verification of the hypothesis which we have earlier framed. The result of the experimental exhibit whether the hypothesis which we have earlier framed, the result of experiment exhibit whether the hypothesis is accepted or refuted. We may find that a strict supervision leads to less copying. In that case, we may conclude that our hypothesis is accepted. If the results are otherwise, then our conclusion will be that the hypothesis is refuted. So experimental design. Student experimental method is the most precise, planted, systematic, and controlled method. It uses a systematic procedure called as experimental design. The term experimental design has two different meaning. One is to experimental design, which represent the six basic steps we have referred it above, followed in an experiment. The second meaning of experimental design and selecting an appropriate statistical procedure. Experimental design provides important guidelines to the researcher to carry out his research study. Experimental design ensures adequate controls by avoiding irrelevant causes of variability. The layout of a design depends on the type of problem the investigators wants to investigate. Student, you should know that no one design solves all the problem of research study. A variety of experimental design have been developed by researchers in recent years. These designs after differ as these are dependent upon the nature of problem, the situation, the subjects, and their availability. Let us study some of the experimental designs and used while employing experimental method. Following are the samples of experimental designs. One group design. One group post-test design. This type of design is the simplest ones. It is commonly called a pre-experimental design. Students in such type of experiment, no formal comparison is possible, for there is no second group with comparison can be made. Let us illustrate with an example. Suppose a teacher treats 10 students who are addicted to smoking in a period of 3 months. At the end of the period 6, a student gave us smoking. Such type of design do not control any of the sources of invalidity. So one group pretested postulated design. This is also simple design and is considered to be a rather poor design, though better than one group posted design. In this design, the experimenter first tests a group or some aspect of behavior and then gives spatial treatment. He statically analyzes the data and calculates the difference between the pre-test and post-test scores of the group. So the paradigm of the design as follows: pre-test T1, independent variable X, and post-test T2. So, example, suppose in the beginning of the semester, we administer test of educational psychology to students of AME education, and then we teach them the subject throughout the semester. At the end of the semester, we administer post test T2 and find out the difference between the score on the essential and final test. Then second, two group designs. Researchers in the education and psychology have often been criticized of being loosely controlled. In recent years, more rigorous designs have been evolved by using statistics to make researches more scientific, more scientific and objective. Generally, researchers use two parallel group techniques to see the effect of an independent variables and some dependent variables. Two groups are equated on the basis of significant variable. One group called experimental and the other is called control group. The experimental group is subjected to a certain experience or to a specific treatment, whereas the control group is not given any type of a spatial treatment. After providing spatial treatment to the experimental group, both the groups are administered the same final test. The scores are statically compared and conclusions are drawn as regard the effect of the spatial treatment on the experimental group. Randomized control group pretest post-test design. The researcher in this design follows the procedure as given below. He selects subject by random method, assigns subject to a groups and X treatment to the group by random method, and test the S on the dependent variables. Keep all the conditions the same for both the group, exact for exposing the experimental S, but not the control group to the dependent variable for the specific time. Test the S on the dependent variable, finds the difference between the two, compares the result to see whether the application of X treatment caused a change in experimental group, applies an appropriate statistical procedure. Measure two groups, two group design. A measure two group design is a modification of the totally randomized two group design described above. In this design, both groups are measured in terms of some variable. The experimenter feels he would influence the dependent variable. Suppose we want to test the retention of two types of words closely associated and disassociated. We believe that IQ will influence how well a person can retain words. So we match the two groups on IQ. Let us be more concrete to understand this point. Suppose there are 10 subjects with IQ as follows. Here, multi-group designs with one independent variable and over. Two group paradigms are most common in education and psychology, but events in nature do not always conveniently order into two groups. Sometimes the investigator has to compare the effect of different values of some variables, or has to see a effect of several alternatives variables on more than two groups. The procedure for carrying out one-way analysis of variance and over is the same as for two groups design. The distinguished feature between the two types of investigation is the type of statistical analysis used. Then factorial design. Factorial design is employed where more than one independent variables are involved in the investigation. Factorial designs may involve several factors. Then small n design. We have briefly mentioned various experimental designs, which are termed as large group designs. In all large n group designs, the number of subjects in the classroom situation, in many instances, the psychologist or teacher is faced with situations in which large n is not possible. For example, delinquency problem of indiscipline, etc. With the introduction of statics in psychology, it is possible to conduct a scientific research on the small n group. So merits of experimental method being most precise and scientific has following merits. Experimental method is the most systematic method for getting reliable data. Experimental method enable accurate observations due to controlled condition. It allows us to establish cause effect relationship between different phenomena. The results observed are valid and reliable. The findings of the experimental method are verifiable by other experimental under identical condition. It helps to protect from the subjective opinions. Hence, it provides objective information about the problem. It provides adequate information about the problem. In experimental method, experiments are conducted under rigorous controlled conditions. The experimenter can control the application and withdrawal of the independent variable. Experimental method increases one's knowledge or psychological facts in child psychology, social and abnormal psychology. It is rightly said the experimental method has made psychology a science. The demerit of method: experimental method suffer from various following demerits. Experimental method is costly and time-consuming method, as it requires a laboratory and apparatus to conduct it properly. Experiments are conducted in artificially determined pattern of behavior. In real life situation, it is quite different. It needs specialized knowledge and therefore, every teacher cannot be expected to conduct the experiment. The scope is limited. All problems of psychology cannot be studied by this method, as we cannot perform experiments for all the problems that may come up in diverse subject matter of psychology. Accurate measurements in case of human beings are never possible. It is difficult to always control the independent variables. Therefore, it is not possible to create desired conditions in laboratory. It is not possible to reach certain certainty in matters of social science, including educational psychology. So in conclusion, student, we have learned in the above unit the four method of studying psychology of learning, but which of the above discussed method is best one among four is a difficult question to be answered. All the four methods have their strengths and weaknesses and possess some unique characteristics which make them highly specific for use in particular situation. A wise psychologist should have a keen insight into the nature of his subject. Psychologist should have a keen insight and the nature of his subject, as well as the conditions affected his work, and accordingly selected a proper method or methods for the objectives. Study of the behavior of his subject much depends upon the sincerity, honesty, ability, and experience of the investigator, who should always try to keep himself as scientific and objective as possible and leave no stone unturned for the overall analysis for the behavior of the subject or nature of phenomena of the study. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you, and thank you.